In this video, we're setting our compass north to a country that's often seen as just hygge and happiness, but trust me, its past is a whole lot spicier than a warm cup of coffee and a pastry. We're talking about Denmark. Now, if you think Denmark's story begins with sleek furniture and Lego, think again. Because we need to rewind to the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BC. Picture this, ice age receding, and people are migrating up from southern and eastern Europe, following the retreating ice. Why here? Well, Denmark is flat, the soil is fertile, and you're surrounded by water. It's a perfect spot for hunters and fishermen. These guys were the first Danes. Fast forward a few millennia to about 3000 BC, and things get serious. People started farming on that flat, fertile land. They go from stone tools to bronze, and then to iron. And by the Iron Age, around 200 AD, these Danish folks are doing big business with the ultimate global superpower of the time, the Roman Empire. Anything from trade links to shipping goods like animal furs, and that beautiful gold and amber all over the place. And fun fact, by this time they're even writing things down, using the rune language chiselled into stone. But let's be honest, the moment you think Denmark history, you're thinking Vikings. Am I right? This is the era of the fierce Sea Kings. It all kicks off around 793 AD with the infamous raid on the English island of Lindisfarne. For about 250 years, the Vikings were absolutely unstoppable. They sailed all the way to what is now Russia, Turkey, Greenland, and even North America. They plundered, yes, but they also traded precious metals, textiles, and less glamorously, even European slaves. They were a sophisticated, albeit violent society. At their peak, guys like Sweyn Forkbeard and his son, Canute the Great, or Knud den Store, ruled a massive North Sea empire that stretched across Denmark, Norway, parts of Sweden, England, and even the Faroe Islands and Greenland. But the chaos had to calm down eventually, and that brings us to the introduction of Christianity. In 965 AD, the Danish king Harald Bluetooth, yes, the tech is named after him, but that's a story for another time, was baptized. This move brought in the Christian clergy and started the shift from Odin and Thor to the cross. Did it instantly make them peaceful? Nope. In fact, they kept conquering territory in Germany and Estonia for a while longer. Old habits die hard, right? But in 1397, something impressive happened. The powerful Queen Margrethe I pulled off a geopolitical masterpiece, the Kalmar Union. She brought Denmark, including Iceland and Greenland, Norway, and Sweden under one single monarchy. But Denmark was definitely the dominant power here. Sadly, the good times didn't last, because in 1523 Sweden broke away, kicking off a long, brutal rivalry. These two countries fought constantly. The worst defeat for Denmark was in 1658, when they had to hand over the southern provinces of Skåne, Halland and Blekinge to Sweden, territories that are still a part of Sweden today. Then, in 1814, Norway was also transferred to Sweden. This loss was humiliating, but it did spark a huge change at home. It set the stage for a power shift that created a hereditary and absolute monarchy in Denmark. But this strong central government actually brought some good things, like agricultural reforms and universal primary education in 1814. The real big change came in 1849 when, in a struggle over German-speaking duchies on the southern border, the king declared himself a constitutional monarch. And that's the start of Denmark's present-day democracy. Unfortunately, that didn't solve the border dispute. They fought a successful war with Germany, but in a renewed conflict in 1864, Denmark was absolutely crushed and had to cede the disputed territories. It's why Denmark chose to remain neutral in World War I. The only silver lining was that after Germany's World War I defeat, a part of that territory voted to return to Denmark in 1920. Now, the 1930s is when the modern social welfare state started to be established, thanks largely to the Social Democrats. But even a neutral, peaceful nation couldn't avoid the next big global conflict. On April 9, 1940, Denmark was invaded by Nazi Germany. Overwhelmed, the government initially put out minimal resistance, but agreed to occupation in exchange for some control over domestic affairs. So for 5 dark years, an underground resistance developed, eventually fighting back. Thank goodness for the efforts of the Allies and the Danish resistance, who finally liberated the country on May 5, 1945. After the war, the economy boomed, leaning into its strengths, Danish design, furniture, and of course, that world-famous Danish bacon and butter. And this post-war prosperity paved the way for Denmark to become a key player on the world stage. In 1949, they were a founding member of NATO. In 1973, they joined the European Economic Community, or EEC, which is now the European Union. Today, Denmark's a strong, stable constitutional monarchy and a defender of free trade and human rights. A long way from its Viking roots, don't you think? So the Viking legacy is long gone, but the Danish connection to the sea is definitely not. Now that we've charted its story, let's zoom in on the landscape, because when you picture Denmark, you should imagine two main parts: a mainland and a massive collection of islands. The mainland is the Jutland Peninsula, which connects Denmark to the rest of Europe, but the country truly distinguishes itself with its archipelago, consisting of over 400 scattered islands. The largest and most famous of these is Zealand, which is where you'll find the nation's beautiful capital, Copenhagen. Geographically, Denmark is part of Scandinavia, and its mainland, Jutland, shares a similar landscape with its neighbour to the north, southern Sweden. In fact, they are attached via the Øresund Bridge. To the south, Denmark shares its only land boundary with Germany, but the Kingdom of Denmark stretches far beyond Europe. It also includes the two enormous self-governing territories of Greenland and the autonomous Faroe Islands. And apart from that small land border with Germany, Denmark is completely surrounded by water. This proximity to the sea creates a rich and diverse coastline, which is generally dotted with inlets, breaks, gently sloping fjords, and even impressive cliffs. For instance, out on the west coast, you're dealing with the dynamic and powerful North Sea, which means long, windswept stretches of sand and dunes dominate the scene. Now, the north coast is just as dynamic, running into the Kattegat and Skagerrak seas and featuring some massive shifting sand dunes. But if you're looking for chill, head to the east coast. That side gives you a much more sheltered, calmer experience on the peaceful waters of the Baltic Sea. So we've seen the calm waters of the east coast, but internally, how does this famously happy country stay so peaceful? It's because if the history of Denmark is about fighting, its modern politics are all about consensus. They have a population of around 6 million people, and their government system is a parliamentary representative democracy under a constitutional monarchy. King Frederick X is the head of state, but the real power is with the Prime Minister and the Parliament, called the Folketing. Here's the key: Denmark operates on a multi-party system with proportional representation. Since 1909, no single party has held an outright majority in the 179-seat parliament, which means governing is all about building coalitions, and they're experts at it. Case in point, following the November 2022 election, the Social Democrat leader Mette Frederiksen didn't just form a typical left-wing alliance. She created a wide bipartisan government composed of the Social Democrats, the Liberal Party, and the moderates. This kind of broad ideological mixing's rare, but the expectation is that this stable government will last its full 4-year term until 2026. And this push for broad agreement is a bedrock of the famous high-trust Danish society. Now let's talk about the money. Denmark's economy is not just strong, it's exceptionally healthy. It's an open, export-oriented economy, and its public finances are, frankly, enviable. I mean, look at these core numbers. The GDP was valued at approximately $429.46 billion in 2024, which represents about 0.40% of the entire world economy. But what I find truly impressive is the state of their public accounts. Denmark has had a surplus on public finances for 9 years in a row and has consistently been the country in Europe with the largest surplus. This means they maintain very low public debt. And on the jobs front, the country boasts record high employment and very low unemployment, expected to sit at around 6.2% in 2025. Seriously, Denmark is in a very, very solid position. So who is driving all this wealth? Well, their history started with agriculture. Today, the economy is dominated by high-value, global exports. The current star and the company that's been driving their growth is the pharmaceutical giant Novo Nordisk, known for the weight loss drug Wegovy and the diabetes treatment Ozempic. Novo Nordisk alone has accounted for up to 1/5 of the country's employment growth in recent years. But don't think Denmark is just a one-trick pony. Because the economic stability is also bolstered by other massive global leaders like the shipping group Maersk, the brewer Carlsberg, the iconic toy maker Lego, and the wind turbine powerhouse Vestas. Despite this, there has, understandably, been some market chatter about the risk of relying too heavily on Novo Nordisk. The government even had to cut its 2025 GDP growth forecast to 1.4%, down from a previous 3%, partially due to weaker prospects for the company, including 5,000 job cuts in Denmark. But here's the important detail you need to remember. The finance minister was quick to point out that the job market had added a whopping 38,000 jobs in the previous year alone, making those cuts much easier to absorb. Looking ahead, while the overall real GDP growth is expected to normalise and likely remain below the booming rates of 2015 to 2019, the economy is still on a positive track, with strong public finances through 2026. Best believe, this machine is built to last. Which brings us to the most important question. How does all that money and political stability translate into daily life? Well, let me tell you, you've probably heard this before. Denmark is one of the happiest and least corrupt countries in the world, and it boils down to one thing: trust. Danes have incredibly high levels of social trust. They trust each other, and they trust their institutions, the government, the police, the hospitals, even the business environment. The assumption is that people are honest unless proven otherwise, and this is a value deeply rooted in their history, and honestly, it's the fuel for the whole system. So why is that trust important? Because it's what persuades Danes to pay some of the world's highest taxes. They trust that those funds are not going into some politician's yacht, but right back into the community. In return, that high tax rate finances an extensive welfare state, where the entire health system is tax-funded and free for the patient. Schools and universities are also entirely tax-funded and free for students. It's this simple idea: everyone must contribute, and in return, the community guarantees care for all. On top of that, Danish families even receive a state benefit of about $1,500 each year for every child under 18 years old, reflecting that high standard of living. And speaking of culturally, family life is all about the famous Danish word, hygge. You've probably heard it, but it's more than just a buzzword. It relates to feelings of coziness, wellness, and contentment. It's the ritual of enjoying the simple things, like a flickering candle, a warm blanket, or a good conversation. And this focus on simplicity and comfort is definitely reflected in modern design. Denmark's art and architecture tell the entire story of the country, from Viking roots right up to the modern era. Architecturally, you can trace the history from the remnants of the Viking period, through the medieval era of Romanesque and Gothic churches and opulent castles, all the way to today. Contemporary Danish architecture is globally popular, focusing on natural light, sustainability, energy efficiency, and comfort. And in the arts, they are famous for producing one of the world's most loved fairy tale writers, Hans Christian Andersen, who was born in Odense in 1805. His iconic stories like The Ugly Duckling and The Little Mermaid, whose statue is a must-see at the Copenhagen docks, define global childhoods. Pretty cool, right? Now let's talk about food. Danish food has undergone a revolution with the rise of new Nordic cuisine. This trend, spearheaded by chefs like Claus Meyer, focuses on reinventing old Danish recipes using strictly local and seasonal ingredients. This movement has propelled Denmark into the global culinary spotlight, to the point where it now boasts 28 restaurants with 39 Michelin stars, more stars than any other Nordic country. As for traditional eats, a classic Danish lunch is the open sandwich, or smørrebrød. It consists of dark rye bread topped with various ingredients like fish, cold cuts, or cheese. Then, a classic dinner is stegt flæsk, fried pork pieces served with boiled potatoes and parsley sauce. Just don't ask for a Danish pastry. The Danes call this Viennese bread because it actually originated in Austria. So, there you have it. The land of trust, high taxes, world-class design, and cosy hygge. Denmark is a perfect example of a country where history, geography, and political stability have culminated in an exceptionally high quality of life for its people. Now, what part of Danish culture are you interested in the most? Having a Michelin-starred meal, or experiencing a cozy evening of hygge? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this next one.